Welcome everyone to the remastered version of the Beginner's Guide to Gunpla. This video will show you simple techniques that the beginner can use to make your Gunpla look as professional as possible with the least amount of work. In this video I'll be going over what we covered before so I can show you a few new tips and tricks as well as share a few new techniques. We will start just like before by removing all the parts from the plastic bags, and the next step is to proceed with washing them. Now my detergent of choice is Purple Power, but any regular dish soap will work just fine, and we're washing the parts to remove the mold release left from the manufacturing process so that the stickers or water slides will stick for a very long time. And to protect your hands, a pair of gloves are a good idea. After you've washed your parts and rinsed very well with warm water, lay out and allow to air dry. At this point you're ready to begin assembling your model. You're going to need 3 tools: a razor, side cutters, and some sandpaper. Now I really like the Tamiya Pro craft knife because you get a lot more control with the way the blade is shaped over an ordinary number 11 razor blade, but a normal one will work just fine. Now the only side cutters I recommend are the Tamiya sharp pointed side cutters for plastic, part number 74035. They are expensive at like $40 retail, but if you cut only plastic with them, they'll last for a very, very long time. Next is sandpaper. Now I really like these nail buffing blocks that you can find anywhere they sell nail polish. The ones you find are probably going to be like these brightly colored ones. I've grown fond of this particular style because it's got a firmer foam block. They last a bit longer and they're cheaper. I get these off of eBay and I search buffing block. The instructions are all in Japanese, but the instructions are always very well done. The pictures are very easy to follow. All you need to do is assemble the parts as the picture shows using the pieces that are in the picture, and you should not have any problems. When cutting parts off the runners, make it a 2-step process. The first step, cut away from the piece. Once the part has been removed from the runner, you can go back and trim closer to the piece. This will prevent any stress damage to the plastic. And to clean up the nub marks, use a razor to carefully trim the remaining nubs down, then go at it with a little bit of sandpaper. I use step 3 to start, which is equivalent to about 1,000 grit sandpaper. Then I usually go back with the razor just a little bit and trim a little bit more and repeat the process until I'm satisfied. And then I move on to step 4, which is the buffing or the polishing side. What you'll be left with is a very smooth and shiny piece. Continue to work through the instructions until you finish building the kit. Overall, this took me about 20 hours to complete, and I went through 6 nail buffing blocks. To prevent frosting the clear parts later on when we top coat this, I've applied masking tape over the canopy and the eyes and camera. It's now time to begin panel lining the kit. I'll be using Gundam markers. The extra fine panel lining markers come in 3 different colors: black, brown, and gray. Part numbers GM01, 02, and 03. Also there's the small marker tip for panel lining, and the part numbers are GM20 and GM21. For panel lining this kit, I'll be using the extra fine gray marker. What color you use is all personal preference. Gray usually works well on white, brown works well on red or yellow, and the black usually works well on the darker colors like blue. Simply run the marker through the panel line, then using a cotton swab quickly wipe over the panel line to remove any excess. You can also use an extra fine or a baby cotton swab moistened with alcohol. This won't work over a painted kit because the alcohol is a solvent and will dissolve most water-based paints, but over an unpainted kit it'll work just fine. The advantage of using an extra fine cotton swab and alcohol is because you don't have to worry about the ink drying and becoming difficult to remove. This will allow you to do multiple panel lines at the same time. As you can see on the back of the shield, a little bit of panel lining will bring out all the details in the plastic. If you're unsure about the process, practice on a spare piece. This next step is completely optional. What I'll be doing is weathering this kit using Tamiya's Weathering Master sets. If you do not wish to weather your kit, simply move on to applying decals. Good sets to have for Gunpla are set A and B. A are a lot of earth tones, great for ground type Gundams. Set B is great because it has soot. Soot is great for most space type mobile suits. Also set E is good to have, as well as the set for Japanese Navy ships. You don't necessarily need both of these, but in this case set E is probably the better choice. The colors in set E will work well depending on the color of the mobile suit. Also for metallics, you're going to want either set C or F. I recommend C, but if you have F, it'll work just fine. It's good to practice this technique before applying it to your model. If you have some spare pieces laying around, they're good to use. Also, if the kit came with any extra parts marked with a black X in the first 2 pages of the instruction manual, you could use those. Each of these sets come with a 2-sided applicator. The brush side is for dry brushing edges. The foam tip is for smudging. It's also a great idea to test out different colors to make sure you're going to get the desired effect. Here I'm going to test out mud, gray, and soot to demonstrate the different weathering results you can achieve with these weathering sets. So these are the steps we are following. First, we assembled and panel lined our kit. Now we're going to weather it using the dry brushing technique, and then apply our stickers, go back, add some smudges, and then top coat. Now the reason I am applying stickers after I do the dry brushing is that the stickers have edges, and dry brushing over the stickers will cause the weathering pigment to stick to the sides of the stickers, making them very visible. And that would not look good at all. Now if I were using water slides, the steps would be a little bit different. After panel lining the kit, we would apply the water slides and using a setting solution on the water slides to dissolve them. After that has dried, we would then apply a gloss coat over the water slides. And this will conceal the edges enough that we would be able to dry brush over them. It is very easy to apply the weathering pigment. Simply rub the brush end in the pigment and then brush the corners and edges of the model. The pigment will stick to corners, edges, and raised details. One thing to keep in mind is that this pigment can get very messy. Be sure you're working in a space that's easy to clean. Be careful how you grip the model so that you don't get fingerprints on it. And you can also use a paper towel to clean off any excess. The metallics are great for like the inner frame or the verniers. This will give them the appearance that they are metal. You can get creative with how you apply the pigments. You can add things like metallics to the armor themselves to give it a more worn effect, showing signs of wear and paint chipping. Here on the shield we can see all the edges are now very defined on the front as well as on the back side. Panel lining highlighted all the recessed areas. Dry brushing has picked up all the raised detail. And here's a quick look at all the finished pieces. The goal here is not to overdo it and to create a very realistic looking appearance. And here's a quick look at the assembled model. Now it's time to apply our decals. Using a razor to lift up the decals and use a toothpick or tweezers to help guide how you place them. Press them down firmly. Rubbing the sticker with a toothpick will remove any silvering effect from air bubbles. Now it's time to go back and add a few more smudges. Instead of using the foam tip of the applicator, I just used one of the extra fine cotton swabs to create small little smudges. The extra fine cotton swab gives me a lot more control than the much larger sponge applicator. You don't want it to look overdone, so it's important that these smudge marks are small. I also used a little bit of light rust on some of the bottom corner edges. It's a very subtle effect, but adds a little bit more detail. And I did this on several locations of the kit. Again, trying not to overdo it. And on the feet, I applied some mud and earth effects. The feet are a very logical spot for mud effects. And we're down to our final step, the top coat. As you can see, I've disassembled the kit and using alligator clips clipped onto all the pieces. It's important that these clips are on securely. Now here are some of the flat coats I've used that I can recommend. Any of these will do, but for Mr. Super Clear, I recommend being very careful. So it's good to practice with Mr. Super Clear before you apply it to your model, and that goes for the rest of them as well. Now when you apply the top coat, it's important that you hold the can 10 to 12 inches or 25 to 30 centimeters away from the model. And I recommend grabbing a ruler and actually measuring how far away you're holding the can so that you don't get too close. And you want to do single pass, very light mist coats. Let that dry, look at it, and if it needs another coat, hit it with another very light second coat, but one coat should be enough. It's important to go very light with the flat coat. If you apply way too much of the flat coat with the spray can, it'll actually dissolve some of the pigment and make it run a little bit, and you don't want that. And I'm actually going to use my airbrush and apply the Tester's dull coat. It's the same stuff you find in the rattle can, except with an airbrush you have a lot more control. If you go light with the flat coat, it shouldn't take much time at all to dry, but be safe, give it like 45 minutes. Now here's a look at the finished kit. Hopefully you guys like it. Now it's important to remember there really isn't a right or wrong way to do this. The great thing about Gunpla is that you can really make it your own. Really the hardest part is learning how to use the different materials and how to apply them to your models. That's why I recommend if you're unsure about anything, just test it out on a spare piece. So hopefully this was helpful, and I want to thank you for watching The Beginner's Guide to Gunpla Remastered.